And veganism really woke me up to that. And I'm no longer vegan, but I feel like that's a really big part of this container as well, which I'll get to in a little bit. But so veganism really woke me up, and like my health drastically changed when I went to basically a whole foods diet. And I was like 23 and I started having these health symptoms. My liver enzymes were elevated, like normal is 10 to 26, and they were like in the 50s and in the 80s. I was having really bad pain with intercourse, which was so terrible for my
Oh
relationship, it
my
was my
God.
boyfriend then, but he's my husband now. And I had this really bad rash around my mouth, which was labeled as perioral dermatitis. And I was struggling with a little bit of weight loss resistance, even though I was marathon training, eating whole foods, all the things. So I was going through nursing school at the time of all this health awakening happening. And I was working in a hospital as a CNA. And so I can still remember the moment. I was a CNA, I was working night shift. I was taking a person to the bathroom, and I remember having a full visceral body like, no, there has
Mm.
got to be a better way to age with grace. My whole vessel said like, no, this is not my story. This is not how I'm going to, spend my elderly years. Not that there's anything wrong with that and how people want to live their life. That's up to them. But I just remember
Mhm.
like I had this visceral reaction, like there's got to be more to this. And so my plan was to go to nursing school and then become a nurse practitioner and then specialize in natural medicine. And so fast forward, graduated from nursing school in the field, enrolled in nurse practitioner school, ready to do all the things. And I just remember feeling all this resistance because I was like, "Ugh, I'm basically going to get this nurse practitioner degree just for the name, just for the name,
Ugh.
And
Yeah.
that's a lot of money. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of energy just for the name. It was at that point that I was having these symptoms. And then I found Emily Morrow. And I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she specialized in functional blood
Mm.
chemistry. She created like this, her own form of root cause medicine using like functional blood chemistry and detoxing. And I like went down that rabbit hole, started detox, like took her course, detoxed myself, and all of my symptoms like went away. And I was like,
Whoa.
okay, why don't I just do this instead of going to nurse practitioner school? So
Yeah.
I dropped out of nurse practitioner school. It was going to start in like a month. And I pursued this path hardcore. I became an integrative health practitioner. I took her course on functional blood chemistry, which is basically like a more holistic way of reading blood work,
Mm.
because our blood work is based on the average of the American population and the people who are, hospitalized. And like that's exactly why my doctor was looking at my labs, and I had one lab out of order. Yet I'm having all these symptoms, and she couldn't tell me what's wrong with me. She's like, "Well, all of your labs are normal except for your liver enzymes."
Ugh, so
However,
many people
I
have that
know.
happen. There's a few things. Okay, so I wanna interject real quick before we
Yeah.
continue. So, I didn't know this about ourselves, but this is, something that I had also really thought or felt when I was also a nurse. So, Des and I both have a background in nursing, and so I had that same feeling of, like, there has to be ways that we can heal more than what I am currently seeing right now. Because what
Yes.
I had seen was more on like the heart side where we're just over and over having these surgeries over and over and still living the same way, still harboring the same energy there and having the same issues and then having this poor quality of life as you get older. And so I had that same like there's got to be a different way than what this is providing for us.
Yes.
And I also had thought about that of like, okay, how can I help more people? And naturally, I think the normal way to think about like healing and health and being a provider, like you just think if I have more of the schooling and if I just get in deeper and then I'll be able to help. And it's like kind of, oh, there's just so much there that is
Yeah.
not working. A lot of it's helpful, but a lot of it, like you said, blood work in general, the way that it's looked at is, people can have all these symptoms, but then they look healthy and they're like, okay, nothing's wrong with you, but the person is like feeling all these things inside. So I just have to
Mm.
say that I felt resonant with that in my story. Also, food also kind of woke me up originally. I was also a marathoner and I went into
I
like
did not
vegan.
know that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So the first thing, this is the first time I like really started to like get into health, I guess, was when I started to I would use running and marathon training as a way of working through my emotions, rather running away from my emotions. But that's how I
Mm.
started to process things once I became a nurse. And I was like, whoa, I could run really far because I was just kind of trying to work through
It
things
was
in
your
my
release.
body. Yeah, and so I didn't know how to release any other way, and because I just bottled everything up. And then I had found this guy that was like, "Oh, try for your marathon training, try to go plant-based and see how you feel." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'll try that." I was super experimenting at that time, and I just felt really good. And I did that for like 6 years until I was like my body was so deprived and, went right back to eating meat. But it was more that I felt great on wholer foods and I was starting to like
Yeah.
kind of get in tune with the body. And so, yeah, it was just interesting
Yeah.
that I kind of was that in my young 20s too. So,
That's amazing. Okay, soul connection for sure. This is
yeah,
so
right.
funny. So, with veganism, it holds such a dear, special place to my heart because without it, I would have never been who I am now. I would have never found Ahai, which I'll get into in my story.
Yeah.
But it was in such alignment with me at that time for like 7 years.
Wow.
I loved it. I was thriving. My body just loved it. I was juicing. Like I loved it. I literally have nothing bad to say about it because it was in alignment for me. And that's where
Mm,
this piece in like the natural medicine world, there's all this like war, like, no, you need to eat this, and no, this is the way to eat. And it's like, it doesn't fucking matter if it's in alignment with you, that's what's right. And so
yeah.
it was really hard for me to end that period of my life because I do have such love for animals and I know you do too.
Mm,
But I could feel in my bones that it was like my vessel needed to shift as I was doing all this energy work. It needed something else. And I really had to release my ego on that because I was like, no, this has been
yeah.
working for me for so long. And I'm not eating an animal. Like I would feel awful.
Yeah.
I did cry the first time I had meat again. And I literally had to surrender and be like, okay, body,
Hmm.
you're giving me the signs. You gave me the signs for like 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
It's time. Like, I need to be in alignment with you, and I will surrender to this. Even though I can't make sense of it, I'm going to surrender. And this was hard because two of my sisters are like hardcore vegans and they've been very supportive. But like it was really hard because and I kept it from them for a while because I'm so close with them and this was a big part of how we connected and who we were. We'd
Yeah.
have our own
Yeah.
meals together. It just was something that we were all so passionate about and it was like that point, I had to separate myself from that and just surrender to my vessel and just be like, I want to surrender to you because without you, I can't even be here.
Ugh. Yeah, I know what that shift's like because and you said it so well is that there's so many like okay, this is the right diet, this is the right exercise, this is the right thing to do and it is if it's like if that is resonant or in alignment at that time for you specifically. And we're not taught to live that way or
No.
try things on for seasons or chapters or whatever. And so when I made that shift I'm very impressed with you being totally vegan, but I tried it and I couldn't go that far, but I just stayed like pescatarian. But
Yeah.
I never thought I would ever eat meat again because I felt so good on it.
Yeah.
And I did that for 6 years. I pushed it and I really should have probably stopped at 4, maybe 4.5. And because of that whole like identity that I created around this of like,
Yes.
I don't eat meat. This is the way I like, this would make me feel good. I'm a marathon runner and all this kind of stuff. And it was like attached to that identity of myself. And I didn't know how to look at myself without that anymore because it was so
Yes.
strong of like who I was how I ate, which is really interesting. And then, yeah, one day I was just like, I literally cannot not eat. Like something came over me. And of course, at this time, I wasn't so tapped into my intuition or knew about energy. I was just like, the baby of baby steps of all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it just one day it just totally like something came over me and I was at like in the work lunchroom with a gal that would make like really good food. She'd always offer her meal to me and it would always be meat based and I would be like, "Remember, don't eat meat." And so one day she offered it to me and I like looked at her and I just knew. I was like, "Yeah, I'll have some." And I'm eating it like 10 minutes go by and she's like, "Oh, that has meat in it." And so it was like, yeah, I was like, yeah, I know, like, this is, I'm gonna try it. And I went home that later that day and I swear to God, I feel like I had like a whole chicken. Like I ate so much meat and I was worried that like I was gonna have gut issues
Yeah,
because you kind
because
of hear about
you
that.
don't have those digestive enzymes anymore. You have to like work your way back into building it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but, like, I had no issues. I
Me
went
neither.
literally 0 to 100 because I think my body was like, "We need this."
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really yeah, that's really, really interesting.
Well, and my body was giving me signs as like when I was vegan, like I said, it was so in alignment. It was so in alignment. I never had any cravings for any animal products at all. Like all my body wanted was plants. And then I started getting like I'd be on Instagram and I'd see bone broth and I'd be like, "Oh God, that sounds so good." And I'm like, "What?" I was like, "Where did that come from?" Or I'd see salmon. I'm like, "Oh, that sounds just so nourishing." And I'm like, "What is this? Like, where is this coming from?" And I just
Yeah,
like intuitively knew, but I sat with it
yeah,
for a little bit until I just knew. It just got to the point.
yeah.
And my
Was
husband
there
was vegan too. And so this was like a huge like this was really hard for me and my ego.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, but I surrendered to my body because that's what we have to do because your
Wow.
body is your partner in this life and it's a co-creation between you and your vessel. And that's what, so much of this container in my story has been about me surrendering to my vessel, getting deeper connected with it. And, now I want to like help other people do this because it's such a big part of their mission is connecting with your vessel. That's how you live your mission is through your vessel, so
Yes. Ugh, we literally could not be here if it was like if it
I
wasn't
know.
for our body. So, and of course, like the more that we feel in coherence with it and we feel more clear and connected and we don't hate on it or we're not like, "Oh, I wish you were this way," or whatever. More things can drop in and actually get down to business of why we're here, which has really been one of the biggest things your containers helped me with.